The distant void. Thra sat silently in the control room of the exploration vessel, gazing at the vast expanse of the galaxy. The stars were scattered like diamonds in the black void, but they held no answers, no signs of life, no civilizations. The mission had begun with so much hope, but that hope was now beginning to wane with each passing cycle. The crew, once excited at the prospect of discovering new worlds, was now disheartened. Thra had seen it in their faces, the resignation, the weariness. The thrill of exploration had given way to an endless monotony, each day blending into the next without any meaningful discoveries. It had been 437 days since the mission began, and in that time, Thra had scanned over 2,000 star systems, catalogued countless planets, and explored various ecosystems. But still, nothing. No signs of intelligent life. No alien civilizations. Just barren planets, hostile environments, and creatures that resembled the most primitive forms of life. As a scanning technician, Thra's job was to find something, anything, that would make the endless exploration feel worthwhile. But so far, his scans had turned up nothing more than rocks, gas clouds, and lifeless worlds. He thought back to the early days of the mission, when the crew was full of excitement and optimism. Recruitment ads had promised them that they would meet strange and fascinating species, explore ancient ruins, and uncover technologies far beyond anything they had ever imagined. They had been told that the universe was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. But now, as the days passed, those promises seemed like distant dreams, far removed from the reality of the mission. Thra sighed and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. He had lost count of how many times he had stared at the same star maps, waiting for a breakthrough that never came. The other members of the crew had their own roles to play, but it was his responsibility to find the signs of life they so desperately needed. The captain and master of exploration had noticed the growing tension among the crew, but no one knew what to do. There was no point in continuing the mission if they couldn't find anything of significance. It wasn't that Thra didn't appreciate the beauty of the worlds they had discovered. He had catalogued planets with volcanic landscapes, massive gas giants with swirling storms, and frozen worlds that seemed to stretch on forever. He had seen creatures the size of mountains roaming hostile terrain, and alien ecosystems that were both beautiful and terrifying. But it was all so empty. The planet's surfaces were teeming with life, but it was the kind of life that existed only to survive, to reproduce, to fight. There was no sign of civilization, no evidence of the intelligent species they had hoped to encounter. It was as if the universe was playing a cruel joke on them. He glanced at the other crew members. Most of them were busy with their own tasks, quietly working away in the background. There was no excitement in their movements, no curiosity in their eyes. Everyone was simply going through the motions, doing their jobs as if on autopilot. The crew had grown accustomed to disappointment, and Thra couldn't blame them. He, too, was beginning to feel the weight of the endless exploration, the fruitless searches that seemed to lead nowhere. As he stared out into the void once more, his thoughts were interrupted by a sudden beep from his terminal. He blinked and sat up straight, eyes narrowing as he scanned the alert. It was a standard signal, a blip on the radar that could be nothing more than a passing comet or a fragment of space debris. But something about it caught his attention. There was a slight irregularity in the signal, a pattern that seemed out of place. Thra quickly ran the data through the system, cross-referencing it with known sources. The signal wasn't a random object. It was coming from a star system about 100 light-years away, a system they hadn't explored yet. His heart began to race. Could it be? Could this be the discovery they had been waiting for? He quickly informed the captain, who responded with a mixture of disbelief and cautious optimism. The crew was tired, but they agreed to investigate. It had been so long since anything of note had appeared on their screens that no one could pass up the possibility of a real lead. The ship was soon on its way to the system, cruising through the darkness of space with a sense of renewed purpose. for his hands shook slightly as he adjusted the controls, scanning the system's planets and moons for any signs of life. The system itself was relatively quiet, with only a few faint energy readings coming from one of the planets. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pique their interest. As they approached the planet, the atmosphere around them grew tense. The crew members gathered in the observation deck, watching the monitors as the planet grew larger on the screen. It was an Earth-like world, covered in dense clouds, but there were signs of structure, something that resembled a city, visible through the swirling atmosphere. The planet's surface was partially obscured by the thick cloud cover, but they could see enough to know that there was something significant down there. The structures appeared to be man-made, or at least engineered in some way. Fred felt a thrill of excitement, the kind he hadn't felt in months. Finally, after all the time spent searching, they had found something. "Prepare for descent," the captain ordered. Fred quickly started the calculations for the landing approach. They were still too far out to get a clear read on the surface, but the energy signature from the planet had already begun to register as more complex. The structures they had seen on the surface looked more like ruins than anything else, but that didn't matter. This was the closest thing they had found to a civilization in over 2,000 systems. As the ship began to descend into the planet's atmosphere, the crew held their breath. There was still no guarantee that they would find anything useful down there, but the potential was enough to spark a new sense of hope. After all this time, they might have finally found what they had been searching for. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of an even greater mystery, one that would change everything they thought they knew about the universe. Aran didn't know it yet, but the first glimpse of civilization was only a small part of a much larger story, one that would reveal far more than he could ever have imagined. And as the ship descended, a new adventure began. The wave in the window. The air inside the control room buzzed with anticipation. The ship's descent into the atmosphere of the mysterious planet was smooth, but the tension was palpable. Aran sat at his console, eyes glued to the screens as the landscape below slowly came into focus. It was a surreal sight. He had never expected to find anything like this in his wildest dreams, an inhabited world, or at least one that appeared to be inhabited. And yet there it was, beneath the thick clouds, a landscape dotted with structures unlike anything he had ever seen before. The structures, though partially obscured by the clouds, appeared to be sprawling, ancient, and built with a level of sophistication that spoke of a long history. The planet was rich with mystery, and for the first time in months, Fred felt a spark of hope flicker within him. Could this be the civilization they had been searching for? Was this the discovery that would finally make all the endless searching worth it? As the ship continued its descent, the crew remained silent, each member lost in their own thoughts, waiting for the inevitable moment when they would make contact with something or someone. Fred glanced at the captain, who was standing by the communications panel. The captain's expression was unreadable, but the tension in the air spoke volumes. "We're entering the upper atmosphere," the captain said finally, breaking the silence. "Prepare for landing. Keep your eyes peeled for any signs of life. This could be a delicate situation." Fred nodded, though he couldn't help the excitement that surged through him. They were about to land on an alien world, a place that had never been explored before. His fingers flew across the controls as he adjusted the ship's trajectory, guiding it towards an open patch of land near the ruins. He had no idea what awaited them below, but the possibilities were endless. As the ship broke through the final layer of clouds, the surface below became clearer. The land was rugged and rocky, dotted with strange plant life and twisted formations. In the distance, Frey could make out the ruins of what appeared to be a city, with towering spires that seemed to reach toward the sky. There was an eerie beauty to the place, as though it had once been a thriving hub of activity, but now stood silent and abandoned. "We're approaching the coordinates," Frey said, his voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline coursing through him. "All systems are stable. Landing in 60 seconds." The ship's engines hummed as they prepared to touch down. The ground was rocky and uneven, and Thray could see jagged cliffs rising on one side of the landing zone. The ruins of the city sprawled across the landscape, the remnants of a once great civilization now weathered and crumbling. The captain gave the order to prepare for landing, and the crew scrambled to their stations. As the ship's landing gear touched down with a soft thud, a strange sensation washed over Thray. It was as if the very air of this place was charged with something unfamiliar, something ancient. He couldn't explain it, but there was an undeniable weight to the silence around them. The crew was still, listening to the quiet hum of the ship's systems as they powered down. The reality of their arrival began to sink in. "Everyone, stay sharp," the captain said. "We don't know what we're dealing with here. There could be hostile life forms, or it could just be an abandoned world. Either way, we proceed with caution." A ship. A massive one, far larger than their own vessel. It was floating just outside the city, hovering silently in space. And inside the window of the ship, there was something, or someone. It was a figure, standing at the window and staring at them. A humanoid creature, tall and imposing, its eyes fixed on the crew. Thray could see the creature's face clearly now, its features sharp and angular, its expression unreadable. Then, in the blink of an eye, the creature raised one hand and made a slow, deliberate gesture. It was as if it was communicating with them, trying to say something. Thray's mind raced. This was it. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The first sign of intelligent life they had encountered in over 2,000 systems. He stepped forward, raising his hand in return, unsure of what the gesture meant but instinctively mirroring it. The creature's lips curled slightly, revealing sharp teeth. It was smiling. A gesture of peace, perhaps. For his heart pounded in his chest. The implications of this encounter were staggering. The captain turned to him, eyes wide with disbelief. "Did you see that?" they whispered. Thray nodded, unable to speak at first. He didn't know what to make of it. But one thing was certain. The mission had just taken an unexpected turn. The world they had landed on was not abandoned, as they had assumed. It was far from empty. In fact, they had just made contact with something beyond their wildest imaginations. The creature's smile faded, and it stepped back from the window, disappearing from view. But Thray knew they couldn't leave without answers. Whatever it was, this civilization, this mysterious being, held the key to a discovery that would change the course of their mission forever. With renewed determination, Thray turned to the captain. "We need to follow it," he said. "We need to find out where it came from, who they are, and why they're here." And so the crew set out, following the path of this alien life form, uncertain of what they would find but driven by the knowledge that the greatest discovery of their journey was just beginning. The adventure had only begun. The silent pursuit. The air on the planet felt thick with mystery as the crew of the exploration vessel moved deeper into the ruins. Their surroundings were eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of the dormant machinery in the city. Thray led the group, his scanners buzzing as he tried to piece together the strange energy readings from the city's power sources. The structures seemed far older than anything they had encountered in their journey, their designs so advanced yet decayed with time. It was as though they were standing on the edge of two worlds, one lost to history, and one that might hold the answers they had been seeking for so long. The figure in the massive ship's window, the one that had stared back at them, was still fresh in Thray's mind. That moment had sparked something inside him, an alien civilization, living and breathing, somewhere just beyond the ruins. The figure's gesture was unmistakable. It was a form of communication, one that no one could ignore. They were not alone on this planet, and the realization struck Thray with a weight that he had never experienced before. This was it, the moment that would change everything. The captain, still cautious but visibly shaken, turned to Thray as the crew moved forward. "What do you make of it?" The captain's voice had a mix of wonder and disbelief. Thray paused, scanning the area. The creature had disappeared from view, but he could sense that something was amiss. The city, though seemingly abandoned, was far too sophisticated to be devoid of intelligent life. "I don't know," Thra said slowly, "but that ship, it's too big to belong to any species we've encountered so far. And the creature, whatever it was, wasn't just some random entity. That was an intelligent being, maybe even a member of the civilization that built all this." The captain nodded, and the smile. It could have meant anything. A warning, a greeting, or just curiosity. "Maybe," Thra said, his voice distant as he tried to push aside the rising anxiety that gnawed at him. "But the fact remains. We've made contact, and now we have to figure out what that means." The team continued walking deeper into the city's heart. As they ventured further, the ruins became more intricate. There were towering spires and massive walls etched with alien symbols, all faded and weathered by time. The structures seemed designed to withstand the test of millennia, and Thray couldn't help but marvel at the engineering behind it all. The place had been built by a species that understood the laws of physics in a way that humans were only beginning to grasp. It felt like standing in the remains of something far greater than any civilization they'd ever known. But despite the awe, there was an undercurrent of dread running through him. It was as if the ruins themselves were trying to tell a story, one of a civilization that had reached great heights, only to collapse and vanish. The silence in the air was deafening. There were no signs of life, no movement, except for the distant flicker of the faint energy signatures that Thra's equipment continued to detect. As the crew reached a central plaza, they found themselves standing before a massive monument, half buried in the rubble. It was difficult to discern the full scale of it, but it appeared to be a statue of some kind, tall, imposing, and strangely humanoid in form. Its features were indistinct, worn smooth by the passage of time. Yet even in its ruined state, there was a palpable sense of power about it, as though the figure was once a revered leader or a deity to the beings who had lived here. "Do you think this was a statue of their leader?" one of the crew members asked. "I think it was something more," Thra replied, his eyes scanning the broken remains. "This could be their equivalent of a monument, a symbol of who they were. Whoever they were, they must have had a deep reverence for their leaders, their warriors, or their gods." Suddenly, one of the crew members, a scientist named Lyra, called out, "Over here. There's something in the ground." Thra and the captain hurried over to her. Lyra was kneeling by a patch of ground that seemed oddly disturbed, the soil discolored and scattered. Using a small scanner, she uncovered a hidden hatch, half buried beneath layers of dirt and debris. The hatch was made of a metal alloy unlike anything they had encountered, and it was covered in more of the strange symbols that adorned the buildings. "Is it locked?" the captain asked, her voice filled with urgency. Lyra nodded. "But it's not sealed shut. If we can figure out the lock mechanism, we can open it." Thra stepped forward, his fingers trembling slightly as he examined the hatch. The symbols were unlike any language he had encountered, yet they seemed familiar in some way. They were geometric, mathematical even, as if the key to unlocking them was based on an understanding of the universe's deeper structure. "Wait," Thra said after a moment, his hand hovering above one of the symbols. "I think this is a sequence. It's a pattern based on sound frequency, not just shape. This species must have used sound or frequency as a way of encoding their technology." Lyra looked at him, astonished. "You think we can decode it?" "It's worth a try," Thra said, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. If they could unlock this hatch, it might lead them to the answers they had been desperately searching for. It could be a cache of knowledge, a secret vault, or even a means to communicate directly with whatever was left of the civilization that once thrived here. They worked quickly, using their best equipment to try and recreate the frequency patterns that matched the symbols. It was painstaking work, but after what felt like an eternity, a soft click sounded through the air, followed by the faint whirring of mechanical gears. The hatch opened. Beyond it, the team found a hidden chamber, small but meticulously preserved. The air inside was stale, yet there was an unmistakable hum of power. The walls were lined with shelves of alien artifacts, books, devices, and what appeared to be a series of spherical objects, each humming softly with an inner light. One of the objects seemed to be a kind of console, its surface etched with more of the symbols. Lyra stepped forward cautiously, her fingers brushing against it. "This is," she whispered, "this is technology. This is their language. We found it." The crew crowded around the console, their breath catching in their throats as they took in the gravity of the discovery. Thre's hands shook as he reached for the console, activating it with a series of gestures and commands. The device powered up, and the symbols on its surface began to glow. A soft voice, mechanical but distinctly sentient, emanated from the console. It spoke in a language that none of the crew recognized, its tone soothing yet strange. Thre's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the first true communication from the beings who had once inhabited this world. The voice was not human, but it didn't matter. They were not alone in the universe. The journey had only just begun.